Everything you see here is just brand new. And wow, it gets even better. It just keeps surprising me. And you see, as you walk along, every moment there's something interesting. GPZ 550. The first mass-produced motorcycle that was equipped with a central shock absorber, which is mounted to the swing arm through a system of levers, just like ProLink or Unilink. You know, all of these is really what we know today. So here's another interesting fact, not just fuel injection, but also the suspension system that most motorcycles are based on nowadays. For the first time in mass production, again, it's the Kawasaki GPZ 550. I didn't know that before, but now I do. As we travel, we come across new flavors. So the 80s are beginning. It was total madness in the motorcycle world. Every manufacturer had their own turbo motorcycle. Every Japanese manufacturer had their own turbo motorcycle. And apparently, I don't know for sure, since my experience in motorcycle journalism doesn't go back that far. Apparently, the consensus was that the Kawasaki GPZ 750 Turbo was the best of them all. And actually, if I think about how many times I've come across a Japanese turbo motorcycle, it really was most often the GPZ 750, and it was the biggest sales hit. 112 horsepower from a 750cc four-stroke. That doesn't sound particularly radical by today's standards, especially if we think, for example, about the H2, but still, this was the 80s. It was just madness. A regular standard turbocharger installed in the motorcycle, but this probably isn't the craziest project. I don't know, you be the judge of that. Take a look at what's happening here. The Z1300, so again, like Honda, well, first Benelli made a 6-cylinder engine, then Honda with a CBX 1100 air-cooled, and then Kawasaki again. We have to have the biggest, the most powerful, so they created the Z1300 6 cylinders. And get this time it's liquid-cooled, meaning it's water-cooled. It was the first mass-produced engine by Kawasaki with this type of cooling. Here we can see just how wild this crankshaft is. The power is transferred to the clutch using a chain. Just incredible on 120 horsepower. That kind of mass just hurtling forward. It must have been pretty terrifying to ride this motorcycle with the throttle fully open. Probably kind of like riding the new H2 with the throttle wide open. Shocking, cool. I like it. And now we're getting into my era a bit. That is a motorcycle that was an impact, not just for me, but for many, many of you as well. The GPZ 900R from the movie Top Gun. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't recognize this motorcycle, but it wasn't just important because it became popular through the movie. This is a motorcycle that shows just how dynamic the 80s were. We're talking about 1984 here, another step, another evolution, the transition from air-cooled engines to liquid-cooled ones. And here we already have a 900cc engine with 112 horsepower. Remember back then it was like that. You had to use a turbo to boost the power. So now we have water cooling, which not only increased the power also, there was a change from 8-valve to 16-valve heads, but this also translated into the durability of these engines and their mileage. These engines could easily go over 100,000 kilometers without any issues. And I think this is where the legend of Japanese engines started to build, that you didn't have to do anything to them, not even touch them. Just get in and drive, rack up the kilometers, just change the oil. And here's another interesting fact. The frame, meaning the chassis system, previously engines were used, for example, from Kawasaki. They were used in frames specially built for sport. Here it turned out that the frame of this motorcycle was already so good that there was no need to use specialized racing frame manufacturers anymore. You could already build support machines on this motorcycle. And I think this is a kind of small, quiet hero that no one talks about, another step towards chassis systems that are starting to, that are already introducing us to the world we know today. So it's not just about the engine anymore, not just about power, but there's a greater focus on how these motorcycles actually handle. Listen, and here's another surprise, because I thought these were motorcycles, this collection previously belonged to a Swedish distributor, and it was bought from him entirely when he retired. I thought these motorcycles were bought and restored, but no, all the motorcycles you see here, except for this one, are brand new, and this one has a mileage of 390 kilometers, simply because it was used for the homologation process. And the mileages you see, for example, the GPC has 8 kilometers on Itare just from pushing these motorcycles around. So absolutely everything you can observe here is essentially brand new, and wow, that truly makes it even more incredibly impressive, even significantly better. All right, indeed, it's quite remarkable. And here we're really entering the modern era, you could say, because based on the GPZ 900R, that is the 900cc liquid-cooled engine, you can already see how completely different motorcycles started to emerge. The same engine, slightly modified, bored out to 1,000 cubic centimeters. The first fully touring motorcycle from Kawasaki, the GTR 1000. Then look at the difference. That's a 3-year difference. The GPZ 900 was in '84, and the GPZ 1000 was already in '87. See how completely the shape of this motorcycle changed? The power increased by 10 horsepower, 125 horses versus 115. Another creation aimed more at the American market, the ZL 1000 Power Cruiser, competing well, I don't know if successfully or not, with Harleys, but it shows just how many different ways this engine could be used. And now the next big step, the ZX10. Again, a huge milestone for me, because the ZX10 is already a name we now associate with Kawasaki sport bikes, and that's the most important thing. The fact that the engine was reinforced to 137 horsepower is one thing, but for the first time there was an aluminum frame in a Kawasaki motorcycle. You look at it, and this is already the era that that I was fascinated by when it comes to sport motorcycles. And here we smoothly move on to the next icon, the ZZR 1100. A motorcycle that appeared and was, in my opinion, quickly overshadowed by the CBR 1100 XX and later the Hayabusa. But again, it's a pioneer because apart from having 147 horsepower, it was an incredibly powerful sport touring motorcycle. Here's another interesting fact that I didn't know about. It was the first motorcycle to be equipped with the RAM-R system, which is dynamic air intake, while reading a feature that we now actually find in all modern sport motorcycles. And what's important is that the fact the air enters under pressure isn't as crucial as the temperature of that air, because all motorcycles up to that point were drawing air from the back, from inside the machine, where the air is heated by the engine. And that was the concept, to have cool air drawn in from the front, pumped into the engine. That's where for those times, unbelievable performance came from. But even today, 150 horsepower in a touring motorcycle is impressive. And we know that the ZZR 1100s are still on the road here and are still valued by many, many, many people. And then came the smaller evolutions like the GPZ 600R, just like there was the Z900 and the Z650. A smaller engine capacity for those who don't need such wild power, who want something milder, more pleasant to ride. GPX 600R, GPX 750R. So many things were happening in such a short period of time. Because again, here we're talking about 87, 89. Well, over the span of 6 years, just a small digression, there was one journalist here who said that there is no better motorcycle in the world that you can buy for the money than the ZZR 1100, and I think many people would agree with that. You walk around here among these GPZs, GPXs, and suddenly there's a Z1000 from 2004. Well, we saw it in 2003, but let's call it the 2004 model. And you might think it doesn't quite fit in here, but actually it fits perfectly. Let's start with the fact that we were just talking about this a moment ago. Our minds are melting when we think about the fact that this motorcycle is almost 20 years old. I mean, when I look at it, I still feel the same emotions as when I saw it for the first time, just like many of you. But this machine is here because it kind of sums up well. It's hard to say the legacy of Kawasaki's 4-cylinder engines, especially the liquid-cooled ones, when it comes to this particular series. This is the motorcycle that really got Kawasaki going again, because I wasn't going to say this, but honestly, everyone knows it back in the 90s and 2000s. You could find other motorcycles, let's call them better, that suited our riding style more. But I remember the years 2003 and 2004, when the whole Z1000 and Z750 series came out with those ZX6 36R gauges, that was just total madness. And in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, Kawasaki with that Z1000 model, which has almost 130 horsepower, adjustable suspension, and rode like crazy, ushered us into the era of powerful naked bikes. It made motorcyclists start looking at naked bikes again after those 90s, when all of us, those into sport riding, were fixated on sport bikes with fairings. Suddenly, more comfortable motorcycles started to appear with wide handlebars, which were just as fierce under the throttle, and sometimes even more so at low revs than the sport machines we knew. So this motorcycle is here for a reason. And now as I look at it, just look at how these four exhaust pipes come together. I remember when there were discussions about this motorcycle, about where these four exhaust pipes came from. But now when you look next to it, there's the Z1000, over there the Z900. You can see how close it all is, how it has evolved over the years. And it makes me want to have a motorcycle like this. Fortunately, maybe this feeling will pass soon, because over there is the motorcycle that I probably want the most in the world.